Close your eyes, exhale, feel your body relax, and let go of whatever you're carrying today.
Well, I'm letting go of the worry that I wouldn't get my new contacts in time for this class. I got them delivered free from 1-800-CONTACTS. Oh my gosh, they're so fast.
And breathe.
Oh, sorry. I almost couldn't breathe when I saw the discount they gave me on my first order. Oh, sorry. Namaste.
Visit 1-800-CONTACTS.com today to save on your first order.
1-800-CONTACTS.
Put us in a box. Go ahead. That just gives us something to break out of. Because the next generation 2025 GMC Terrain Elevation is raising the standard of what comes standard. As far as expectations go, why meet them when you can shatter them? What we choose to challenge, we challenge completely. We are professional grade. Visit gmc.com to learn more.
Well, thank you very much, and it's an honor to be here today. We have first full day as president. We're back.
On January 21st, a freshly sworn in, though kind of tired-sounding President Trump had a press conference with some big names in tech. Oracle's Larry Ellison, SoftBank's Masayoshi Son, and OpenAI's Sam Altman. The idea was to announce a splashy joint project, a $500 billion investment in American artificial intelligence and data centers. It would be called Stargate.
Together, these world-leading technology giants are announcing the formation of Stargate. So put that name down in your books, because I think you're going to hear a lot about it.
Certainly, everyone in front of the microphones wanted you to hear about their plans and how patriotic they sounded. Just listen to Altman.
To create hundreds of thousands of jobs, to create a new industry centered here. We wouldn't be able to do this without you, Mr. President, and I'm thrilled that we get to.
In the press conference, Altman pledged that he would begin investing $100 billion immediately into data center projects across America.
That's Burbridge, who covers AI for the Wall Street Journal.
And over the coming years, he pledged that that number would go up to $500 billion. But like with any announcement, big infrastructure or investment that companies announce with Trump, there's a sort of PR element to it, right? Where you're appealing to Trump's love for the headline number. And it's clear that when they made that announcement, they hadn't really figured out how they were going to raise the $100 billion and how they were going to spend those $100 billion. You know, there were still a lot of things that they had to figure out. And even fast forward to the summer, they're still trying to even figure out the basics behind how this massive infrastructure project is going to play out.
But here we are, more than 7 months later, and this Made in America AI super project is not going great.
They're supposed to raise the money to finance building data centers, find where to build the data centers, and then obviously build those data centers. And it's just been really difficult. It's a lot harder to get into this industry than they may have anticipated. And we've reported that they've basically scaled down their plans to building what's going to be a very small pilot data center, likely in Ohio, by the end of the year. So a very far cry from the $100 billion that they pledged to begin investing immediately.
Today on the show, how Stargate overpromised and underdelivered. I'm Lizzie O'Leary, and you're listening to What Next TBD, a show about technology, power, and how the future will be determined. Stick around.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
This podcast is brought to you by Smalls. Is your cat ready for a diet upgrade? then you need Smalls cat food, named the best overall cat food by Cats.com. Smalls cat food is packed with protein and made with preservative-free ingredients, giving your cat the high-quality meal they deserve. And it's delivered right to your door. After switching to Smalls, 88% of cat owners reported noticeable improvements in their cat's overall health. Plus, Smalls has donated over $1 million worth of food to help cats through Humane World for Animals, so you can feel good about every purchase. The team at Smalls is so confident your cat will love their product, you can try it completely risk-free. Give your cat the food they deserve. For a limited time only, because you are a What Next TBD listener, you can get 60% off your first Smalls order plus free shipping by using code TBD. That's 60% off when you head to smalls.com and use promo code TBD. Again, that's promo code TBD for 60% off your first order plus free shipping at smalls.com. I want to understand how the idea of Stargate came to be. Whose brainchild was it?
So Stargate was the brainchild of Sam Altman. It's a very Sam project in that it's a humongous project that requires a lot of money, that almost feels so ambitious that it's impossible to achieve. So the idea for Stargate emerged 2 years ago. This is when ChatGPT had taken off and OpenAI desperately needed more computing power to be able to build their models and then also basically just service all the people who were using ChatGPT. And he coined the moniker Stargate almost as a project that would basically build massive data centers for OpenAI across the country. It started off as a project that Altman pitched to Microsoft, which is OpenAI's largest investor, for a long time their exclusive cloud provider. And he basically asked Satya Nadella to use Microsoft's massive war chest to basically build these supercomputers across the country to power OpenAI.
But right at the same time, a coup within OpenAI briefly led to Altman's ouster. It was messy and confusing, and Microsoft wanted a little distance between the two companies.
And Nadella, he's the CEO of a publicly traded company. He got some cold feet, backed off from Stargate. And so Altman spent most of last year searching for a new partner who would A, have the money to build these data centers, and B, be willing to take the risk behind such a project. Because OpenAI is a money-losing startup, very unclear if it will even be able to pay for all the data centers that it's promising to use. And so Altman settled on Masayoshi Son, who of course is the consummate risk taker in Silicon Valley. Hasn't always gone well for him, but that's sort of how that partnership emerged and what Stargate ultimately turned into.
Masayoshi Son has a reputation for taking huge risks, making big bets, some of which have paid off handsomely for him. Alibaba, some of which have not. WeWork. He, has made fortunes, lost them, and made them all over again. But significantly, he really wanted a way into the AI mania that is gripping Silicon Valley. What are the stakes for Son and for Softbank in this deal?
That's a great question. So Masayoshi Son, he's had a kind of a tortured relationship with tech, like you said. Been tremendously successful, of course, starting with his early bet on Alibaba, but he's also become a little bit of a laughingstock in Silicon Valley, where usually if a startup takes money from SoftBank, it's a red flag. It's a sign that they weren't able to find funding from any other investor. SoftBank has always had this reputation as being sort of the dumb money that's kind of, looking for places to park its cash. And so I think Masayoshi Son very much is aware of that reputation, and he wants to redefine himself in the age of AI, just like every other big tech CEO, startup founder, investor. And, he hasn't had the best luck in the past few years. He missed out on investing in OpenAI when it was still a very young startup. He hasn't invested in some of the other flashy AI companies that have rocketed up in value. He's talked about the depression that he feels by the prospect of him missing out on the AI revolution.
Sun is also known for making grand, lofty proclamations about the future. Here he is at a conference for the Future Investment Institute late last year, talking about why he is all in on AI.
My definition of ASI is 10,000 times smarter than human brain. That's my definition of ASI, and that's coming in 2035. 10 years from today. 10,000 times smarter. That's my prediction.
And so for him, this big project with OpenAI to essentially build the computing future of the industry is a really key pillar of his vision for cementing his legacy, cementing SoftBank's legacy during this moment of tech transformation. And so again, it's the sort of the vision and the dream of building supercomputers across America that will usher in a new age of superintelligence. I think that's what's driving him forward, right? But then there's also the much more difficult reality of actually being able to make all that work.
And it sounds like the two of them, or at least certainly Sam Altman, sold this to Trump in part to be able to give a little middle finger to Elon Musk.
Exactly. And that's where, there's so many personalities in the story. But yeah, he kind of announced this deal with Trump knowing that Musk would get upset and knowing that Musk might not be able to keep his thoughts to himself. And he was correct. I think just hours after the announcement, Elon was, criticizing the deal on Twitter. It was his first public break from the administration.
You might remember this interview that Sam Altman gave not long after Musk's criticism.
Do you think Musk's approach then is from a position of insecurity about XAI?
Probably his whole life is from a position of insecurity. I feel for the guy.
You feel for him?
I do, actually. I don't think he's a happy person. I do feel for him.
Okay.
And he's really played that very well, right? He kind of brought in Masa, who's also very close to Trump, and Larry Ellison, who's the Oracle chairman, who also has a relationship with Trump. And they all kind of stood at that press conference together and were all named in the Stargate press release. And so, yeah, I think Altman was very crafty in building these alliances that would get him close to Trump and also drive a wedge between the president and Elon Musk.
But now, of course, we have had some time pass. You've done a lot of excellent reporting. And at the heart of this project is building data centers. They take an immense amount of water and energy to power, to provide the computing power for AI. So how are things going building those data centers?
So it's not going very well. SoftBank and OpenAI, when they made that announcement, they said they would start investing $100 billion immediately. At the time, they envisioned that they would have, multiple large projects in the works very soon after that announcement with Trump. And what's happened instead is basically we haven't heard much about the progress behind that partnership. They haven't struck a single deal to build a single new data center. And what we're hearing is that by the end of the year, they've kind of scaled back their goals to building what's going to be a very small data center in Ohio that ultimately isn't really going to be a huge differentiator for OpenAI. And what we've seen instead is Altman and OpenAI striking deals with other companies that are building data centers for them. So OpenAI struck a massive deal with Oracle to build data centers worth 4.5 gigawatts in power.
That's the equivalent of more than 2 Hoover dams.
He struck deals with Google and another startup called CoreWeave. And Stargate really hasn't been in the mix. And remember, Stargate was initially envisioned as a joint venture between OpenAI and SoftBank. They created a new company that was supposed to raise the money to build the data centers and also operate the data centers themselves. What you've seen Altman do is kind of rebrand Stargate to be about the portfolio of all of his data centers. And so I think this is something that Altman's very good at doing, which is, he has a way with words and he's very good at kind of putting out a lot of shiny objects that distract from maybe the reality on the ground.
When we come back, so is the end of this big grand narrative just one little data center in Ohio?
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages. Whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
Not all meals are created equal. For instance, breakfast has the spicy egg McMuffin for a limited time, and lunch doesn't. McDonald's breakfast comes first. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Do we know why it's been so hard? Money is more expensive, interest rates are higher. Is it for that reason? Is it because communities don't want data centers? Like, what's the why behind Stargate's inability to do this right now? And I guess the reason that Altman is branding these other things as part of Stargate.
I think building data centers are just really difficult, especially data centers of the size that OpenAI and Softbank were trying to build. Basically, the largest data centers in the history of data centers. You have to find the right plot of land. You have to make sure it's located close to power sources, that there's enough water that will be available to help cool down the data centers. You often need to get approval from regulators and lawmakers. And building data centers are also very risky, right? There's a decent chance that OpenAI isn't able to actually pay for the data centers that they're trying to build because they're a money-losing startup, very unclear what their financial outlook will be in a few years. And so there's also this question of how much risk to take in terms of how big you go with these data centers. And one other complication actually relates to, it's a little bit wonky, but it relates to this company called Softbank Energy, which is basically a renewable energy developer that Softbank owns. And what we've heard is that Softbank wants these Stargate data centers to be built on land that's owned by Softbank Energy.
That's convenient.
Which is very convenient. OpenAI would say, we're open to building it on plots of land that another company that you are invested in owns, but also that is a conflicted transaction. And we want to make sure that you're not trying to use Stargate to kind of prop up your other businesses. And so there are these kind of business dynamics that are a little bit thorny that I think OpenAI in particular probably didn't envision would become issues.
Yeah, you referred to a data center in Abilene, Texas in your reporting as what? They're doing these things without SoftBank, but they're titled as Stargate. Like, I would imagine all of this creates, I don't know, some conflict between these two chief executives, or at least between these two companies, because they seem to have competing interests, or at least interests that are not perfectly aligned.
Yes. So I think that's part of the tension, right? I think, Sam Altman and Masayoshi Son, the company said that they have a very good relationship, and, SoftBank is on the hook for investing up to $40 billion into OpenAI. So in many ways, their fates are intertwined, but you're right. There are a lot of tensions, I think, that are bubbling beneath the surface, at least amongst the negotiators who are in the weeds trying to make these, grand plans for building supercomputers work. When OpenAI first struck the deal with SoftBank for Stargate, the idea was we are going to use data centers built by Stargate to power our AI. It's going to be a win-win because Softbank, you'll become a big player in the data center space. It's going to be this really tight alliance where we end up being the customer of Stargate. And we're going to replace all the other cloud providers. We don't need anyone else to build data centers for us. Like, we don't need Microsoft. We're not going to need Google or Amazon. Like, the goal was essentially for Stargate to become a new massive data center provider. And what's happened instead is that because Stargate has struggled to get off the ground, OpenAI has turned to other companies, the same companies you would expect any AI company to turn to. They've turned to Oracle, they've turned to Google, they're still using Microsoft. So there is this sense that OpenAI is kind of racing ahead without SoftBank. And, I'm not completely sure how that's affecting the interpersonal relationship between Altman and Masayoshi Son, but it definitely can't help.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, how much does Masa-san want in on AI and need a win? Like, how much is he willing to tolerate, basically, in order to try to keep this thing going?
I think Stargate is a really central component of his AI ambitions because for a long time, SoftBank, they had their two vision funds, like the biggest venture funds in Silicon Valley. They made all these bets on companies that Masa hoped would become these enduring tech giants. That's been a big flop. You mentioned WeWork, which is probably the biggest scar on SoftBank's legacy. And SoftBank really isn't that much of a player right now in the venture investing world. Like, they missed out on OpenAI. They've missed out on a lot of the AI companies. And you really don't hear about them getting in on really great deals. And so I really do think that Masa is pinning a lot of his ambitions to make it big in AI on his partnership with OpenAI, but also his role in the world of computing and data centers.
All of this is happening as the Trump administration tries to roll out these AI initiatives. I'm curious, does Stargate help them achieve their goals, or even just talking about Stargate help them achieve their goals? Because a lot of those initiatives are a little fuzzy.
Well, I guess that begs the question of whether President Trump will, get held accountable for those big headline numbers. My perspective is always he lives news cycle to news cycle. So in that sense, I think being able to announce a $500 billion infrastructure project on the second day of his presidency definitely bolsters his image that he is very pro-AI, that he's very big on, boosting our domestic data center supply. And it's made him very popular amongst the Silicon Valley crowd because the Biden administration, they were just more cautious. They took longer with permitting and licensing, and they were very concerned about national security risks tied to building data centers abroad. And so I think just by being able to do these press conferences and stand alongside the big titans of tech, it definitely brandishes his image as someone who is very pro-AI. I think even if they don't get to that $500 billion number, in some sense, it doesn't really matter because he already announced it.
But if Stargate founders, that can't be a good look for, U.S. AI dominance, or I guess for OpenAI.
So that's the other wrinkle here, which is that, Stargate was pitched as very much a project to bolster American competitiveness. It was framed also as a way for us to, reduce our dependence on other countries. We should build data centers in America, and we should not be outsourcing this really crucial part of the AI supply chain to other countries. And it was also pitched as, a project that would help reindustrialize the Midwest and give hundreds of thousands of jobs to American workers. I think the fact that it's gotten off to such a bumpy start should make you cautious of those grand pronouncements. But also there's this element where OpenAI is also doing these massive data center deals abroad. Most notably, this big deal that they did with the UAE in the Middle East, where essentially they're building also a very large data center there, which they're also ironically calling Stargate. But in some sense, that type of deal is very antithetical to how Stargate was first marketed, right? Which is an America First data center project. And OpenAI lobbied very hard to get in on that UAE deal. And a lot of people in DC, national security experts, people in the industry are concerned that, by building massive data centers in the Middle East, especially in the UAE, it potentially gives a backdoor to for China to be able to take advantage of our technology. It also just offshores a very important part of the AI supply chain to another country. And so there is this dynamic where it was pitched as an America First project, and now, OpenAI has also struck deals to build data centers in other countries, which is at odds with the initial marketing for the project.
So what will you watch to see how the next phase of this goes? What will you be looking at to see whether this Ohio data center might be, a blueprint, or whether it's sort of a last gasp of something that didn't quite work out? Like, what's the next phase of this story?
It'll be really interesting to see in the coming years if they're able to figure out the formula for building massive data centers, essentially live up to Stargate's vision, right? We know that it's going to take them a lot longer than they anticipated, but it still is an open question whether they'll be able to figure it all out. It's become clear to both OpenAI and Softbank that building data centers is not easy. And I think the bigger question is, how will Stargate affect the relationship between OpenAI and Softbank? Because this big infrastructure project, Altman and Son envisioned it as the cornerstone of a long-lasting partnership between OpenAI and Softbank. So I think if this project doesn't get off the ground in the way that those two leaders may have envisioned, it could sow the seeds for, or it could at least, raise a lot of questions about what the future of that partnership looks like. And I think if you're Altman, you have to be aware, if you're thinking about the history of Silicon Valley, you have to be aware that associating yourself with SoftBank isn't always a winning formula.
Berber Jin, thank you so much for your reporting and for coming on to talk with me.
Of course. Thanks, Lizzie.
Berber Jin covers AI, startups, and venture capital for the Wall Street Journal. And that is it for our show today. What Next TBD is produced by Evan Campbell, Patrick Fort, and Shayna Roth. Our show is edited by Paige Osborne. Mia Lobel is the executive producer at Slate, and TBD is part of the larger What Next family. If you like what you heard, the best way to support us is to join Slate Plus. You get all your favorite Slate podcasts, including this one, ad-free, and you'll never hit a paywall on the Slate site. Just head on over to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. All right, we'll be back next week with more episodes. I'm Lizzie O'Leary. Thanks for listening.
I'm Chris Hadfield, astronaut and citizen of planet Earth. Join me on a journey into the systems that power the world. No politics, just real conversations with real people shaping the future of energy.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts.